I found out my son has been sleeping with his brother's wife, so I uninvited him from the winter celebration. He says it's none of my business and that I'll get over it. Plus 3 updates. I always loved this time of year, that first week of November when the mountain air turned crisp and the leaves clung to their last bits of color. I was out on the deck, checking the propane line for the patio heater, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my younger son, Alex. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice low and flat. "Hey, buddy. Just making sure we're all good for next weekend. I've got the cabin stocked and I'm not coming." I stopped mid-step, my boot crunching against gravel. "What do you mean, not coming?" There was a pause, and then a slow exhale on the other end of the line. "Lena's been having an affair." The words didn't register right away. I heard them, but they didn't stick. I just stood there, staring out at the tree line, my mind trying to catch up. I'm sorry, son." "Jesus. Are you all right?" He chuckled once, bitterly. "Not really." "Who?" I started, then stopped. I didn't want to know, but I needed to. Alex didn't make me ask twice. "It's Marcus." Everything went quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop. "No," I said, mostly to myself. "Yeah," Alex said, sounding almost embarrassed. "My own brother." I felt something sour crawl up from my gut, like acid. I leaned hard against the railing. "Are you absolutely sure?" "I found messages, Dad. Voice notes. Pictures." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just closed my eyes and tried not to throw up. Marcus. My firstborn. The one I thought had finally pulled his life together. 2 years of him talking vaguely about a special someone, and I just nodded along like a fool. "I'm so sorry," Alex muttered. "I didn't want to drop this on you right before the holidays." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "You did the right thing." He didn't say anything else. I think we both knew there was nothing left to say. "I'll call you back," I told him. "Soon." I hung up and stood there, staring at the trees. I must have been out there a while. When I finally went inside, I didn't sit down. I grabbed my phone again and pulled up Marcus' contact. I typed, "You're not welcome at the cabin next week. Stay away." He replied 5 minutes later, "Dad, this is none of your business." I blocked him without another word. After that, I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to piece it all together. Every cryptic mention of someone who gets me. Every time Marcus had brushed off my questions with a smirk. It was Lena. It had been her all along. The worst part? I hadn't seen any of it coming. That was the moment I knew my family, the one I'd built and fought for all these years, was coming apart at the seams. And the unraveling had already begun. I waited until after dinner to tell Joanna. We were sitting in the den, 2 steaming mugs of peppermint tea on the coffee table, our golden retriever sleeping in a tight coil near the fireplace. The cabin always felt like a sanctuary this time of year, warm, quiet, safe. But that night, it felt like a lie. I didn't ease into it. I didn't know how. "It's Marcus," I said. Joanna looked up from her crossword. "What about him?" "He's been sleeping with Lena." Her pen froze midair. "What?" I nodded slowly. "Alex told me this afternoon. He found proof. It's been going on for a while." Joanna stared at me, the way you look at someone when you're not sure you heard them right. Then she set the crossword down on the couch beside her. "That can't be right." I mean, she paused, her voice catching. "That's his brother." "I know." Her face turned pale. "Oh, my God. Alex." I nodded again, unable to say more. We sat in silence for a while. No TV, no music, just the ticking of the old mantel clock and the wind rattling the windows. "I already told Marcus not to come to the cabin," I finally said. "Blocked him after he told me it wasn't my business." Joanna looked over at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Good." That was all she said at first. Just that one word. Then she leaned over and took my hand. "We'll still do the gathering," she said. "But just for Alex. He needs us now more than ever." I squeezed her hand, feeling that familiar pulse of steady warmth she always offered in moments like this. We'd been through so much together, the house fire, my retirement, her mother's long illness. But this felt different. This was our son's. Later that night, I sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of scotch and opened my old leather-bound journal. I wasn't sure what I was writing, a letter, a rant, maybe just words to get me through the night. "You didn't just betray your brother. You dismantled the core of this family." That was the first line. The next morning, I called my sister, Mara. I thought she'd understand. I thought she'd side with Alex. But I was wrong. "Well, that's awful," she said, after I told her. "But Rick, you can't just uninvite your own son." "He made his choice," I replied. "He's still your blood." "Family isn't blood," I said. "It's loyalty." And Marcus threw that away. There was a long pause. "Then I won't come either," Mara said, her voice cold. "Not if this is how you treat your children." I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just said, "Okay, take care." And I hung up. Alex arrived just after noon the following Saturday. I heard his truck coming up the gravel drive long before I saw it. The engine had that slight whine, like it hadn't had a proper tune-up in a while. When I stepped outside, he was already climbing out, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, eyes hidden behind sunglasses even though the sun barely broke through the clouds. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice low. I gave him a quick hug, not sure how tight was too tight. "Glad you're here." He nodded and looked past me at the cabin, like he wasn't quite ready to walk in yet. Joanna came out the front door and wrapped him in a hug before he could say anything else. She didn't let go right away. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. And we're here, okay? Just here." He nodded again, eyes still hidden, and followed us inside. The place looked like Christmas already. Joanna had gone overboard with the garlands and fake pine cones, but it didn't feel forced. It felt like she was trying to stitch something back together. I appreciated that more than I could say. Alex unpacked quietly and took the guest room across the hall, Marcus's old room, actually. He didn't comment on that, and I didn't point it out. We all knew. That evening, Joanna made her famous turkey pot pie and poured cider into the mugs with little cinnamon sticks. We turned on some light jazz, and for a while, it almost felt normal. Almost. Then there was a knock at the door. Alex stiffened. "Relax," I said. "No one's dropping by." I opened it and found a small cardboard box sitting on the porch, no one in sight. A note was taped to the top. Joanna stepped up behind me. "Who's it from?" I read the name aloud. "Helen Dreyfus. Lena's mother." We brought it inside. Alex opened it at the kitchen table while we watched. Inside were 24 neatly packed cookies, oatmeal raisin, ginger molasses, and his favorite, snickerdoodles. A card sat on top. He read it silently, then passed it to me. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Please know I don't condone what she did. You are still, and always will be, a part of my family. Love, Helen." Alex swallowed hard and looked away. Joanna reached out, put a hand on his. "I didn't expect that," he said after a moment. "She's a good woman," I said quietly. "You deserve better from her daughter. But not everyone in that family is broken." Alex gave a tiny nod. He picked up a cookie and stared at it for a second before taking a bite. Later that night, after he went to bed, I sat back at the table and opened my journal again. I turned to the page I'd started after talking to Mara and began drafting something more structured, not a rant this time, but a letter. "Marcus, what you've done isn't just a betrayal, it's a fracture that may never heal. I want to believe there's something salvageable in you, but right now, all I see is a man I don't recognize." I didn't finish it that night, but for the first time, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Thanksgiving came with a thick fog that clung to the mountain like it didn't want to let go. Joanna and I were up early, prepping the turkey and stringing extra lights on the back deck for the younger grandkids who'd be arriving with our daughter Emily and her husband. For a brief moment, the cabin felt alive, like a place where joy might still grow, even after everything. Alex was quiet but present. He peeled potatoes in the kitchen and helped Joanna set the table without needing to be asked. Every now and then I caught him staring out the window, eyes distant. But when the others arrived, Emily, her 2 kids, even her college-age stepson, something softened in him. He smiled. He even laughed. It was almost normal. Around 2:30, I realized I'd forgotten cranberry sauce. The real kind, not the canned stuff. I grabbed my keys and told Joanna I'd be back in half an hour. By the time I pulled back into the driveway, I knew something was off. Emily's car had been moved, and I saw Alex standing stiff at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. Joanna was in the doorway, looking like someone had just punched her in the stomach. Then I saw the black SUV idling by the trees. "Marcus." I parked fast and walked up the gravel with slow, steady steps. "He just showed up," Joanna said, voice tight. "Said he needed to talk." I turned to face my son. He looked the same as always, neat haircut, polished boots, that confident posture he always carried like armor. But his face was different. Hardened. Defensive. "Dad," he said, like we were about to have a reasonable chat over coffee. "You need to leave." "I'm not here to cause drama," he said. "I just think everyone's overreacting." I laughed. I actually laughed, a bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. "Overreacting? I didn't cheat on you," Marcus said, as if that was some kind of defense. "You're acting like I slept with your wife." Joanna gasped. "You slept with your brother's wife?" I said, stepping closer. "That doesn't just go away, Marcus." He shrugged, actually shrugged. "We love each other. Maybe if people weren't so stuck in their old-fashioned ideas of family." "Stop," I snapped. "You think this is about ideas? This is about decency. About betrayal." He rolled his eyes. "You'll get over it, Dad. You always do." That did it. I walked to the front door, held it open, and pointed. "Go." "Seriously. I won't say it again." He looked around like he was expecting someone to step in. But Alex stood behind Joanna, arms folded, silent. Emily was watching from inside, one hand on her son's shoulder. Marcus finally turned, muttered something I didn't care to hear, and walked back to his car. I closed the door and locked it. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Alex let out a breath and said, "Thanks, Dad." I nodded, my chest tight. "You don't turn your back on family," I said. "Unless they turn their back first." The Monday after the holiday, Joanna and I drove down to the town where Alex used to live with Lena. He needed help packing what was left of his things, and I think part of him just didn't want to walk into that house alone. Lena wasn't there. She'd left the keys under the mat and taken most of the furniture. The place looked hollow, like a shell of the life they'd built together. Alex didn't say much. He just walked from room to room, pulling things off shelves, checking drawers, pausing every now and then when he'd find a photo or one of her scarves. "I feel like a guest in my own home," he muttered at one point. Joanna wrapped her arms around him. "That's because it's not your home anymore." "That's okay." We spent most of the afternoon packing boxes and loading the truck. Around 5, as the sun started sinking behind the hills, a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. It was Helen, Lena's mom. She stepped out with a grocery bag and a nervous smile. "I brought some coffee and sandwiches. Figured you might not have eaten." Alex hesitated before walking over. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said, handing him the bag. "But I wanted to." Joanna invited her inside, and for a little while, we sat at the kitchen island, sipping lukewarm coffee and picking at turkey sandwiches. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. Helen looked over at Alex. "I don't know what Lena was thinking. I really don't. But I want you to know. I'm not choosing sides. I still care about you. You were always good to her." Alex didn't respond right away, but then he gave her a small nod. "Thank you." After Helen left, we stayed a little longer to sweep and finish labeling boxes. Before locking the door, Alex stood in the living room and just looked around. "I thought I was going to grow old here," he said softly. "You still can," I replied. "Just somewhere else. Somewhere better." That night, back at the cabin, I sat down with my journal again. I opened to the draft of my letter to Marcus, the one I hadn't finished. This time, I did. "Marcus, you've always been my son, and I've always loved you. That hasn't changed. But trust isn't automatic, it's earned. And right now, there's nothing left to give you except honesty. I will never stand in the way of your life. But as long as you choose Lena, you will not be welcome at any event where your brother is present. Not because I hate you, but because I love him more than I hate what you've done." I sealed the envelope and set it by the door. No more silence. No more confusion. It was time he knew where I stood. 1 year later, almost to the day, I found myself sitting alone at the cabin with my journal open and a pen in hand. The snow hadn't come yet, but the trees outside were bare, the wind steady and cold. I used to dread this kind of silence. Now, I welcomed it. "Alex moved overseas," I wrote. "Met someone new, a woman named Clara. Teaches English and paints. They seem good for each other. He finally looks like he's sleeping again." Joanna and I weren't hosting the holidays this year. We were headed to Maine, to Emily's place. She'd had her second baby in September, a little girl named Ruby. Our first granddaughter. After everything that happened last year, it felt good to hold new life in my arms again, to rock her and smell that powdery sweetness only babies seem to have. Marcus had sent a text a few weeks back. Just a photo, him and Lena on a beach somewhere, and a caption that said, "She said yes." That was it. I didn't reply. I didn't even show it to Joanna. We didn't talk about Marcus much anymore. Every now and then, I'd see something on social media, a photo, a tag, a birthday post, and it would stir up a strange mix of anger and grief. But mostly, I just felt numb. People say time heals all wounds, but they don't tell you what kind of scars it leaves behind. I thought a lot about my late wife that week. Susan, the boy's mother. She passed 3 years ago, cancer, quick and cruel. Toward the end, she used to worry about the boys constantly. I remember her saying, "I just want them to love each other when I'm gone." I failed her on that. That guilt settled into my bones and never really left. Sometimes I wonder what she'd say now. What she'd do if she saw how everything unraveled. Maybe she'd try to fix it. Maybe she'd hate Lena. Maybe she'd forgive Marcus faster than I could. I'll never know. I closed my journal and looked around the cabin. It still felt like home, but a quieter one now. Less full. Before we left for Maine, I walked through each room, turning off lights, checking windows. When I got to the old study, I lingered. On the bookshelf was a photo of the whole family from 5 years ago, before anything broke. Before lines were drawn. Marcus stood in the middle, arm around Alex. They were both laughing. I turned the frame down. Some things didn't need to be remembered anymore. Then I zipped up my bag, grabbed Joanna's suitcase, and headed for the car. Time was moving, whether we were ready or not. And I had no intention of being left behind. 2 years after everything, I no longer lived in the cabin. Joanna and I moved to a quiet coastal town in Rhode Island, just 20 minutes from Emily's house. We downsized, bought a modest single-story home with a little porch and a view of the water if you craned your neck just right. It wasn't the mountains, but it had its charm, the salt air, the gulls, the distant sound of boats rocking on their ropes. Life felt slower here. calmer. I spent my mornings walking the boardwalk trail behind the community center, sipping coffee from a thermos Joanna insisted on decorating with seashell stickers. That's where I met Tony. He was a retired carpenter from New Jersey, widowed like me. We started chatting one morning about fishing, then weather, then whatever came up. Before long, it became routine. 7:30 a.m. walks, followed by breakfast sandwiches at the little cafe near the pier. Tony was the kind of guy who didn't pry but always listened. A rare thing. We talked about baseball and our kids and the weird way life turns corners you never saw coming. I told him everything eventually about Marcus, Lena, Alex, all of it. He never gave me advice. Just nodded and said things like, "That's a damn shame." Or, "You did what you had to do." And somehow, that helped more than anything. Emily's kids called me Pop now. Ruby was walking and talking, and her older brother Liam had taken a shine to helping me fix up an old wooden bench I found at a yard sale. I gave him a tiny toolbox of his own for his birthday. He carried it around like it was made of gold. We had visits from Marcus and Lena, maybe twice a year. They drive in and stop by for coffee. Always short, always civil. They'd bring some store-bought cookies, compliment the house, and ask how everyone was doing. It was awkward, but manageable. I couldn't bring myself to ask much about their life, and they didn't offer much in return. I loved my son. I didn't know how not to. But something in me had changed, some thread had frayed and snapped, and no matter how polite our conversations were, I couldn't feel that warmth I once had when he walked into a room. He noticed. I think Lena did too, but no one said it out loud. After they left, I always felt a strange emptiness. Not sadness. Not anger. Just flatness. Like watching a movie in black and white. One evening, as Tony and I sat watching the tide roll in, he said, "You ever gonna let that boy all the way back in?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't think I can," I said. "Not because I don't want to. Just because I don't know how anymore." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. "Sometimes, that's just how it is." And I knew he was right. The week before Christmas, I drove out to visit Susan's grave. The cemetery sat on a small hill outside town, overlooking a field that always caught the winter sun just right. I brought a thermos of cocoa and a photo, the old family picture from before it all fell apart. I cropped Marcus and Lena out of it, not out of spite, but because it felt more honest that way. It was a picture of the people still holding each other up. I brushed the frost from the headstone, cleared a few twigs, and sat on the bench nearby. "Hey, Sue," I said softly. "I brought you something." I pulled the photo from my coat pocket and placed it at the base of the stone. Then I added the note I'd written the night before. I didn't read it aloud. It wasn't for the world. Just a few lines in my handwriting, nothing fancy. Regret, love, gratitude, and a quiet confession that sometimes I still wondered what she would have done differently. The wind picked up, tugging at my coat. I stayed there a while, just listening. The quiet was different out there. It had weight. That night, back at home, I found myself in the living room watching old home videos on the little TV Emily had rigged up with a USB stick. It started with Christmases from a decade ago. Susan in her holiday apron. The kids opening presents. Me, with a darker beard and a lot more energy. Then came the laughter, hers, clear and bright, echoing through the room like it never left. I didn't even try to stop the tears this time, but I wasn't crushed by them. I let them come. Let the ache sit with me a while. And then, slowly, it passed. Later, I sat down with a pen and paper and started planning next year's Christmas. It wouldn't be big. That wasn't the point anymore. I made a list. Alex, Clara, if they visited from overseas. Emily, the kids. Tony, definitely. Maybe Helen, if she was up for it. The people who'd stood beside me when it all cracked. The ones who kept showing up, year after year. Not everyone, but enough. I folded the list and slipped it into my journal. The house was quiet again, but this time, it felt full. Not because everyone was here, but because I finally knew who really belonged.